a presser that just happened a few hours ago in Brampton, Ontario. We have a couple of clips. One is Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, addressing this and advocating for a major change to the criminal code that would, favor the homeowner at 3:20 in the morning and not the guy with a lethal force weapon breaking into the home. And better yet, folks, we had our very own big boss man, Ezra Levant. He attended the presser and got a question in. So why don't we watch those clips and then we'll discuss the aftermath. Check it out.
Based on the principle that your home is your castle, we're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law, failing which one of our party's MPs will put forward such a bill. It will amend Section 34.2 of the Criminal Code, which right now says that you can defend yourself based on 9 very complicated and vague conditions. Now look, if you're defending your house, you don't have time to think through 9 different conditions. You have one condition: to protect yourself and your kids. And it is wrong for the law, for the police, and for judges to apply a complicated, indecipherable legal doctrine against you when you were only doing what is right. Our amendment instead will change Section 34.2 of the Criminal Code to say that the use of force, including lethal force, is presumed reasonable against an individual who unlawfully enters a house and poses a threat to the safety of anyone inside. The proposed amendment is reasonable and prudent. It applies only to the unlawful entry of a home and preserves proportionality. Simply put, it means you have the right to use force to defend your home and your family against someone who threatens you and who has entered illegally. This bill will also put Canada in line with other developed, civilized countries. Ireland, several Australian states, Spain, the United Kingdom, and some American states already have this principle embedded. And it will make sure that Canadians are treated right for a change. We think that our role in this Parliament is to put forward good ideas. And so my message to Mr. Carney is steal our best ideas. Work with us. Let's get it done. Let's put our country first. Who cares who gets the credit? Take our ideas so that we can reverse not only the crime and chaos Liberals have caused, but let's also take these ideas to bring the cost of living, immigration, and unemployment down. Keep our people safe. Let's put our country first. Let's once again work together, all of us from all parties, to make this a country where everyone who works hard gets a beautiful house in a safe street with good food on the table, united under our proud Canadian flag. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, let's go around the horn. Daniel, let's begin with you. I think this is right in your wheelhouse, being the publisher of Caliber magazine. I think Pierre Poilievre nailed it. The fact that there are 9 vague and complicated conditions when it comes to a homeowner fighting back with force or lethal force. And I have to tell you, if someone's breaking into my home at 3:20 in the morning and they have lethal force, the very last thing I'm thinking about is, gee, I don't want to overdo it. I might get charged by the cops later tonight or tomorrow. So I'm going to respond in kind. No, I have adrenaline coursing through my blood. I am in Papa Bear mode. I'm sure Drea would resort to Mama Bear mode. And you will do whatever you can. So I think the idea of putting a definition in which you can use force, including lethal force, into the criminal code, much like it exists in so many other countries and so many American states, I think that's a winner. I think that has great popular support here in Canada. Daniel, what say you?
It's hard to argue with anything he said. I mean, obviously, the whole statement's pretty clear cut and it's pretty unassailable. My only concern is that the currently and in the past process has been the punishment. There'd have to be some additional shifts towards the law can say one thing, but right now, I mean, right now you can technically still use illegal force to defend yourself in your home given the nine circumstances. But what happens is the legal system simply goes through, instead of assuming that you're innocent of this, they simply charge you, and then they work through those nine criteria in the court, and you end up paying a ton. And that relates to why I think the statement's quite interesting from the gun perspective, is that back in 2013, we saw a case with Ian Thompson. People were firebombing his house and his dogs and whatnot. He was a firearms instructor. He went into his gun safe, he pulled out a handgun and fired it in the air to scare them off, and then was summarily charged with a bunch of offenses. That case took over a year, I believe, to be resolved, and almost six figures of his own money. And he was eventually acquitted. But by the time you're acquitted, you've paid more than your life savings. You probably remortgaged your house. It ends up being such a thing where it can be legal, but it can still be such a painful process to go through that it will ruin your life to engage in that. And I think that's the thing that's problematic. But what I think is interesting is that in the Ian Thompson case, when that was going on in 2013, even amongst gun owners, it was controversial. There was a lot of gun owners that were saying, well, we don't own guns to defend ourselves. That's not what we do in Canada. We don't have concealed carry. They were distancing themselves from that US rhetoric. And it was actually probably the majority, I would say, were kind of doing that. Now to see this rhetoric amongst the general population, to say nothing of how the gun community responds to it, to see it in the general population is, I think, indicating a tectonic shift in the attitudes around these sorts of issues, be it guns, self-defense, how those things intertwine, that it kind of looks like we're on a trajectory where things like this are going to become inevitable. If it doesn't happen with Pierre Poilievre forming the next government, it will be a future government that does, because we are reaching a point where Canada is becoming more violent. It is suffering more crime, and we are not recruiting more police officers. We are not putting criminals in jail for long enough. We are not essentially dealing with the problem. So we're going to reach an impasse where we kind of reach a spot where we go, well, there's a lot of crime and we don't have enough cops. So what's the solution going to be? Just let people be victims? Probably not. So I think it's an interesting step towards that conclusion, I think.
No, great points, Daniel. But I got to tell you, I find that somewhat surprising. There was gun owners that weren't all in. I would argue they would surely have their come to Jesus moment with U.S. rhetoric at 3:20 in the morning. If there's a guy holding a crossbow that can take down a moose, all that would be out the window. But Daniel, tell me, Kirk, tell me, I think to Kirk's point, or Daniel's point, I'm sorry, I'm getting the names mixed up. The process is indeed the penalty, but I think what Pierre Poilievre is suggesting is to remove the penalization part, i.e., if you actually killed a home intruder under his amendments, you wouldn't be charged. You wouldn't be going to court. You wouldn't be facing high five-figure, even six-figure legal bills. So doesn't this, in a very big way, take away the process as the penalty factor?
Well, that's the hope. We got to step back a little and remember Canada society has been a high-trust society for a long time, and the Liberals have decided to mass immigrate our essentially crime stats. We've reached record high levels, and the solution to it has become slapping criminals on the wrist and releasing them back into the streets. Mm-hmm. So the evolution of our legal system must adjust to what's happening day to day in our society. When someone breaks into your house at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., you don't have the time to adjust to see, do they have a weapon, do they not? A weapon in any case is essentially an equalizer, right? What is a lethal weapon? Someone can punch someone on the side of the head and they'll be dead, yep. Right? But someone needs to be able to protect himself. For me, to defend myself against someone that's breaking in is a lot different than a 60-year-old or a 60-year-old woman or a 20-year-old woman that's home alone. So we need to be able to not question to homeowners' decisions when they're fighting for their life. When someone broke into your house, they essentially decided that your life is worth less than the amount of goods they can steal and sell for. So they made the cognitive decision, and the onus isn't upon the homeowner to do due diligence on how to defend themselves. They have to defend themselves for their life. So it's up to the courts to take it and make sure that those criminals are locked up and locked away for good. We're seeing them released over and over again. So I'm hoping that the new changes, if they even get passed and have support, will discourage the cops from wasting time and resources on homeowners who are just trying to survive the crime epidemic that we have going on in Canada.
No, 100%. And of course, Poilievre has hammered home tightening up, bail conditions, parole, etc., catch and release. And lo and behold, the alleged crossbow home intruder in Lindsay, Mike Breen, guess what? He was already wanted by police for probation violation. Unbelievable. But you know what? It's all those, duck hunters in Saskatchewan. They're the problem. We have to take their guns away. That's going to solve this. Drea, let me ask you this. At the end of the day, Pierre Poilievre's job is to get reelected. I want to get your thoughts. Is this a winner in Canada? And coast to coast in Canada? Personally, I would think it is, because our stories on the Jeremy McDonald home invasion in Lindsay, there has been thousands and thousands of comments, and I haven't had time to read them all, but I've read most. And I'm telling you, it is 99.99% in support of Jeremy McDonald fighting back, criticizing the police and the prosecutors for going after him for defending his life. I would argue, without knowing, I bet you that 0.01% saying, no, he went too far. Those are liberals living in gated communities with security guards. So what say you? Does this policy change resonate with Canadians?
I assume you're talking to me. It froze a bit. So sorry. But yes, absolutely. This is a no-brainer. And it's a no-brainer because anybody in this situation, most, like you said before, are going to want to defend themselves. The James Brown verse that I love when he says, I don't know karate, but I know crazy. That's exactly what would happen to me if someone's in my house. I don't have time to consider these 9 rules, or to be honest, I don't know how much I care that there are rules at that point. I'm going to do everything I can. I know my husband would do the same. If he wouldn't, I wouldn't be married to him. That's just the way it is. I did notice one thing. It's very slight, but I thought it was interesting. Dan mentioned that in the other case with the dogs before, there was that rhetoric and wanting to separate yourself from the United States. I thought it was interesting the order of which Poilievre listed the other places that basically have the castle law. Did you notice that he said the United States last? I think that was on purpose to try to not make this look like this is coming from the United States and that he is behaving like Trump when he's going ahead and delivering this really common sense approach. And of course, rock star Premier Smith was so great in the way that she handled this question, which is saying, if you don't want to get shot or beat up, don't break into somebody's home. It's really that simple.
You're reading my mind, Drea. I mean, I can hear the liberal left screaming, oh my God, he's advocating homeowners use lethal force. But you nailed it. Daniel Smith said, hey, you don't want to get hurt or killed? Simple. Don't break into somebody's house at 3 a.m. Case closed. Why don't we, everyone, throw to our big boss man, Ezra Levant, asking a question, and we'll check out what Mr. Poilievre had to say.
Yes, Ezra.
Thanks for having me here. Ezra Levant from Rebel News. For years before marijuana was decriminalized, it was the position of police and prosecution not to charge anyone with small amounts in possession. So they didn't wait for the Parliament. I see that Mark Carney's favorite premier, Doug Ford, has said he's for the castle law, and other provinces like Alberta have said that too. Will you call on Doug Ford not to wait for Carney to reconvene Parliament, but rather to issue a statement that there will be no more prosecutions of homeowners who defend their homes just as a matter of policy, because right now his prosecutors are going after Jeremy McDonald, whose home was invaded in Lindsay, Ontario.
And those are provincial prosecutors who are doing that? Well, I think that's a great idea. I don't know the legal powers that a premier has to direct the prosecution service, so I would not comment on it. But I would hope prosecutors would stop going after law-abiding people who are defending their property. We need prosecutors to go after criminals. Now, as for their ability to do that, I've never been a Crown prosecutor, so I don't know. We have a Crown prosecutor here, Larry Brock, so maybe he can jump in on this. But I will say this: we need to change the law. Let's make the law clear. Let's bring into place the idea that your home is your castle, so that no prosecutor, judge, or police officer can ever go after someone who is defending their home against an invader who presents a threat. Do you have anything to add, Larry? Prosecutor. This is the prosecutor.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Although Crown prosecutors in every province, particularly in Ontario, maintain independence, as long as they can justify that independence, they are still directed policy-wise by the Attorney General. In this case, the Attorney General of Ontario being Doug Downey. To answer your question, Mr. Levant, Mr. Downey has that ability to perhaps direct Crowns in light of what we are doing at a federal level to reflect upon the change in legislation we hope is about to come.
Great question. Very interesting answer. Kirk, let's start with you. I found it somewhat disingenuous last week when Premier Ford weighed in on this. First of all, he called the system broken. That was his quote. I presume he means the justice system. Well, fix it. You're the premier. Secondly, and I'm paraphrasing now, but he said, whoa, if someone broke into my house, I'm going to use whatever force necessary to protect my family. Well, the other day, I paid a visit to Doug Ford's house. Do you know what? He has 2 Toronto Police Service cruisers in his driveway 24/7. Doug will never get his hands dirty. He's got lethal force by police officers in his driveway around the clock. So, I mean, the tears he was shedding, I'm sorry, to me, they were of the crocodilian variety.
Yeah, it's we need to stop with the empty words, and we need to actually see some leadership at the provincial level, at the federal level. The crime wave in Ontario hasn't started in a week. It's been going on for at least 5 years now, with a year-over-year increase in stats, and Doug Ford hasn't really said anything about it. So it's his job, and it's the job of Ontarians as well, is to start raising the alarm and actually do something about it. And he didn't even really say much about the car theft or break-ins or anything until something affected him. And then all of a sudden he was up in arms about it. But, well, it's been happening. There's maps, crime maps in Ontario, and there's streets where there is like every other house has a break-in or car theft in it. So imagine living in those streets in Ontario where you essentially, as a statistic, you're expected your car to be stolen. And people are installing metal doors now. They're trying to put barricades so you can't reverse and steal the car out. It's absolutely insane what is happening. And he didn't say a word until it's impacted him. So we actually need to see some leadership and not just word salads in a presser and then moving on 2 minutes later.
Wow, Kirk, you mean people are turning their homes into fortresses, putting in steel doors? The Toronto Police Service says leave your key fob at an easily accessible point, so, we don't have to deal with the crime scene cleanup later. But, Daniel, I want to address something with you, and it is the inconsistency regarding force and lethal force across Canada. I'm sure you're familiar with this story. 4 years ago in Red Deer, Alberta, a homeowner returned to his home, and it was very much quite different than the Lindsay case involving Jeremy McDonald, because when the Red Deer resident returned to his house, he saw his home was broken into. He found the intruder asleep, if you can imagine, in his room. So what he did is he picked up the phone, called police. He picked up his shotgun, which had a shell in it, woke up the intruder and said, "You stay right there." And originally the intruder agreed, and then he decided to disagree. A scuffle. He was shot dead. Do you know, gentlemen, that the RCMP of Red Deer did not even press charges, which the prosecutor agreed with? And yet, here we have in Lindsay a home invasion 320. The assailant is armed with the lethal weapon, and Jeremy McDonald gets charged with aggravated assault and assault with a weapon. Daniel, can you make sense of this for me?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the fact that at a political level, people are acting because these leaders are much like Doug Ford. They have police officers around them. You know, Mark Carney lives in a very Tony neighborhood. They don't have to confront how Canada actually is, because a lot of us live in different areas, rural areas, Red Deer. So you get these massive cultural divides where in Alberta, obviously because of some of the things that even premiers have said, even before Danielle Smith, like they have a very strong culture of self-defense, independence, self-responsibility on both ends, where they, you know, that responsibility cuts both ways. If someone breaks into your house, they have to take responsibility for that action. As the homeowner, you are responsible for protecting your house. Whereas in Ottawa and Ontario, that's a very different culture. Like I've traveled around the country doing various gun things, and I can tell you as someone who's been born and raised in the West, every time I go to Ontario, it's always struck me how it's very difficult to put into words, but it is a very different culture. It's almost a culture of permissiveness, where in BC and Alberta, it's if the law says I can't do it, then everything else is on the table. Whereas in Ontario, it feels much more the law needs to tell me I can, and then I can do it. And that's sort of the East-West divide. And I think that explains why in Alberta, you're going to see people not charged. It's led to, you know, provinces or provincial governments in Alberta, especially, that have imbued their provincial prosecution service with cultures of independence, respecting people's independence and freedom, their ability to defend themselves. And that's been going on for decades. So we see the result in cases like that. And in Ontario, on the other hand, it's that much more, we'll tell you what you can do. So when someone does something, they're going to say, well, we're just going to run you through the system, and we'll see how it shakes out after we've charged you and what the courts say. And I think that's how that is sort of explained. I think it's also evidence that we need to address this probably in a more significant way than what Pierre Poilievre is proposing with an amendment to the criminal code. I think that having gone through a lot of these laws for years now, the Firearms Act is especially bad for this. Our laws are simply too complicated at this point. They've been put through so many governments that prefer incrementalism over actual reform. So they just keep making small amendments to laws to try and wiggle things out. So in this case, you know, they say, okay, well, we'll make it so that if someone breaks into your house, you can use force if necessary, but we're going to preserve proportionality. So how's that going to work, really? It needs to be a bit more of a significant revision so that police, homeowners, and the Crowns all have a lot more black and white scenarios in front of where they go, yeah, this just isn't illegal, and this is. I think that would probably do a lot to restore faith in the justice system. It would also unburden our police officers with looking at stuff and going, that's not a crime, this is. We're going to reallocate resources where they're needed. I mean, obviously, like I said, the Firearms Act is the best example of this because it is so convoluted that we need special lawyers to help us decipher it at this point. It shouldn't be that complicated. So I would like to see a bit more of a strong stance, and I think that it's the right step. But to refer to your early question, if this is, you know, a winner, as you asked, Ray, like this is a step towards a winner. But I think there's actually room to run on this and take a more significant leadership position, saying, yeah, you know, we're going to reform the criminal code completely. We're going to address the crime problem we have at the root source of the tools we've got, the law. We're not just going to amend it in small ways. We're going to take a fresh, clean sheet look, and we're going to make it work for the modern era, because this isn't a very old document that has been rewritten and rewritten and rewritten to such a degree it's kind of lost the plot.
You know, great points, Daniel. And to me, it sounds like you're arguing for a Canadianized version of the Second Amendment, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. But Drea, let's go to you. What about Daniel's original point that maybe this is a regional issue? I lived in Alberta for 2 years in the 80s. I can tell you by far, Alberta is the most American-like province in our Dominion. And maybe there is more respect and appreciation for the rights of firearms owners there than in Liberal Ontario. Is that what it comes down to? Is that the reason why the Red Deer man doesn't even get charged and Jeremy McDonald gets 2 very serious criminal charges laid against him?
I'd have to agree. I think that's what it is. And I think that's kind of what Poilievre was getting at. Like, we're supposed to bring forth good ideas. It should be, when it comes to keeping citizens safe, that's nonpartisan, that everybody's on the same page and trying to put their heads together. But we don't see that in between provinces. Provinces and their provincial prosecution do behave differently, and that includes in British Columbia. For example, you have journalists doing whole seminars about the attacks on journalists. They're never talking about Rebel News journalists, of course, but you have a crazed trans individual threatening my children and using real hate language against me, and the BC Prosecution Service will do nothing, even though this person is a convicted criminal. This person has a very violent past, and this person has already assaulted one of our journalists. Our province here does not take that seriously when it doesn't align with their own political ideology. Another more recent example is Samadoun. We had it's now, I would say Canada almost reluctantly deemed it a terrorist entity. But before that, praising the Hamas 7 terrorist attack, calling it heroic and brave, death to Canada, death to Israel, death to United States being chanted in their protests. I didn't see it personally. Many have said that they received pamphlets that were describing how to do a terrorist attack in buildings. Those types of things are happening, and yet our Attorney General, it's been well over a year since the leader of Samadoun, Charlotte Cates, was in fact charged with hate crimes, and our BC prosecution service hasn't done anything. They haven't done any charges, which is why MLA Dallas Brody, the leader of 1BC, recently did her own private prosecution. So I think that whole situation where there's a terrorist entity and a leader, and their movement is getting Canadian citizens to call for the death of Canada, I think that would have been taken seriously in a province like Alberta.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's beyond 2-tier policing and politicking. It's probably into 3 or 4 tiers. And I think of the iconic image of Lady Justice, holding the sword in one hand, the scales in the other, and she has a blindfold on. Well, that blindfold has been replaced with X-ray glasses these days, and it really does in many cases come down to identity politics. Hey guys, we have to take a quick